petrol. In a mechanized world, ownership of this fuel means almost unlimited wealth for men and nations to spend, for good or evil. And money means power, the strength to cast something new from the raw material of a nation and its people. It means the opportunity to change ancient patterns in a society and replace them with something more in keeping with the pace of a modern world. Oil, a God-given gift, is the key to many things, but it unlocks the chains of poverty which have kept many a nation held fast for centuries. Such a nation is Iran. Ever since the ancient Persian Empire was put to the sword by Alexander the Great, this country has waited for the chance to re-emerge as a power in the world. For 2,000 years, the sands of the desert had been burying the glories of the past. But under the sand was oil, and industrial revolutions, thousands of miles from these shores, made Persia, now Iran, important again. Iran's own revolution came late. Only slowly has it begun to turn from the past to the future. But the process is accelerating. Iran is changing itself, enriching itself, and assuming a new and crucial strength. In this issue, Echo looks into the rebirth of a nation, Iran. Tehran, a waterhole when Persia was mighty, and now the capital of the new Iran. Like capital cities everywhere, Tehran is the showpiece of the nation it represents. The tempo here is much the same as in any other city. The traffic just as thick. The working population equally bound by office hours and the clock. The miniskirt is here, with all its consequences. But life doesn't move as rapidly through the whole country as it does in Tehran. There's still room and a need for more traditional ways. Persian carpets are still a lifetime occupation for their makers. Iran had relied on the old and the traditional far too long. While it concentrated on ancient crafts, modern invention passed it by. The hereditary skills are still practiced and are still important in their way. But at last, Iran recognizes that the world has changed, that it must harness itself to less ornamental but more profitable production. The sheer pace and the size of Iran's overdue industrial revolution can be measured day by day in the rapidly expanding factory estates now thrusting upward in the desert. The cost involved is huge. Iran's new 5-year plan foresees the spending of $35,000 million on industrial development. And all but 5,000 millions will come from Iran's own resources, mainly oil and natural gas. Natural gas is Iran's newest discovery. Much of it is piped to Iran's fuel-hungry northern neighbor, the Soviet Union. In a massive reciprocal deal signed in 1966, natural gas paid for this Soviet-built steelworks near Isfahan, now capable of producing 700,000 tons of steel a year. And Iran is also about to become a major source of copper. Estimated reserves of over 300 million tons have recently been located. Iran's copper revenue may outstrip even the annual $2,500 million the country now earns from oil. Iran's potential wealth is enormous, but who will benefit from it? The answer lies with its king, the Shah.
We have a capitalist system here, if you accept that what is not communist is capitalist. On the other hand, all wealth has been nationalized. All natural resources, such as the forests, the land, the water, the steel and the oil industries. Furthermore, all major industrial companies have been, let's say, advised to open their accounts to the public, which will soon own 49% of them all.
When Iran got down to the job of transforming itself into an industrial nation, it was doing more than spend its money wisely. It was following the long-term precepts of the Shah, who is determined to make the maximum use of Iran's natural good fortune while it lasts. He's a man in a hurry, attempting to bridge the gulf of centuries in only a few decades. Iran is also tying its industrial expansion program to massive social advancement. 10 years of this aggressive economic policy has already raised the average Iranian worker's income from $220 a year to $550. By the end of its new 5-year plan, during which a further 2 million jobs will have been created, it's estimated the average income will rise to $950. And it's no pipe dream. Industrial output during the last 5-year period grew by over 11% a year, and in 1972 alone was over 14%. And under a fair capital system like Iran's, the more people produce, the more they earn. Iran's natural wealth enables it to buy a wide range of foreign expertise and investment in its economy. And in accordance with its neutral position, it does deals regardless of politics. Car factories and a diesel engine plant have been built in cooperation with Britain. West Germany has installed an aluminium smelting complex. A petrochemical plant is operating in co-production with a Japanese firm. There's a Swedish ball bearing factory and a Czech machine tools industry. And all have been made possible through a policy of exchanging oil and gas for credit and technical help. Light industries have been established in numerous centers away from the principal towns. Consequently, desert areas and simple people have been transformed. 10 years ago, the hand plow was a sophisticated implement. Today, this place resembles Detroit. But Iran and its Shah are concerned not only to make this nation economically strong. There is, running through the whole program of modernization, a strong thread of social advancement. The Shah's own White Revolution, now 10 years old. Its promise was nothing less than a breakdown of an ancient feudal society and its replacement with a new idea of social justice and equal opportunity. And the Shah is delivering that promise. And along with it has come a new freedom of expression. The Shah believes he has successfully crossed the divide between the old feudal Persia and the new developing state of emancipated Iranian people. And he's done it with a minimum of repression. The right to free speech is reflected in Iran's 22 daily newspapers, as well as its democratic elected government. It is, of course, largely controlled by the Shah. But what he does, he appears to do for the good of his people.
Ours is a policy of participation embracing all men and women. It is our national effort, our national resurrection, carried out within the framework of very advanced social laws, which sometimes go further than those of even, for instance, the Scandinavian countries. We are not too concerned about what others might think of the system. The results speak for themselves. I don't think you could be in this country for 5 years without becoming aware that all these things are being put into practice.
The Shah's mystical relationship with his 28 million subjects rests partly on their reverence for the peacock throne, and partly on practical things like this modern hospital in Tehran. For this is the social reform he promised them: an efficient health service, education, and a higher standard of living, are benefits they see coming directly from the Shah's hand. The Shah has given them these things, but above all, he's made his people feel they really do matter, however insignificant they may be. And there is a feeling, call it national pride, that the new Iran is in good hands. This is where the imagination behind the Shah's white revolution scores most heavily. Here, in the Iranian outback, where new industry, new jobs, and a living wage have not yet come to pass. Because even here, while they wait for the promise of good times to come, the spread of social services, the caring hand of government demonstrates they're not forgotten. In a remote township, hundreds of miles from Tehran, a doctor calls once a week, and that never happened before. And when it comes to showing people that they matter, something practical like this is worth 100 declarations of intent. This revision of social priorities began exactly 10 years ago. Then, after 21 years of rule over a country which was politically and economically a mess, the Shah appealed over the heads of the powerful peaks to the people. He asked for their support and got it. And Iran has never looked back. The Shah declared his intention of rescuing a sick nation and breathing life back into it, and he succeeded. In the literal sense, medical services like this are rooting out disease. In the larger sense, social and educational reform are as important. For today, the mind, as well as the body of Iran, is gaining strength.
We had estimated that at the end of the 5-year plan, the fourth such plan, we would have something like 70,000 young boys and girls in our high schools. But we've already passed a figure of 90,000. And who knows what it will be next year. Unquestionably, we have exceeded our expectations, in spite of our early fears.
Donc on a largement dépassé tout ce qu'on avait prévu.
Part of the Shah's upheaval gave women the vote for the first time. Another was to appoint a woman as Minister of Education, and to use more and more women as teachers. Hundreds of young women like these are being given crash courses, after which they're sent on the road to bring simple education to the masses, to that 50% of Iranians who are still illiterate, the people Iran needs to educate if its ambitions are to succeed. The will to learn is there. Indeed, the will outstrips the facilities. Last year, 80,000 students applied for university entrance, but there was room for only 15,000. And if full education was one of the long-term objectives of the White Revolution, land reform and its improvement through irrigation and the use of chemical fertilizers was its first principle. Over the past decade, 2.5 million peasants have acquired their own land, and the government has encouraged them to acquire new skills. They learn modern agricultural methods and raise new types of crops developed through government experimental schemes. Finally, they pool their resources and their knowledge to make cooperative farms like this function economically and fruitfully. The formerly monopolistic landowners were compensated and induced to invest in trade and industry. While every year, more and more landless peasants discover the luxury of working on the earth they own. All this is a long way from the oil fields, but it's oil which has footed the bill for this growth, as it has done for the whole of Iran's dynamic leap across the poverty barrier. Iran has been spectacularly successful in husbanding its resources and applying them to making itself strong. But it has attracted jealousy as well as admiration, and in a sensitive corner of the world, it's as well that Iran is powerful. Iran has an armed strength of 165,000 men, a powerfully equipped force which dwarfs those of its neighbors. When the British withdrew from the Persian Gulf, Iran assumed the balance of power between, on the one side, the Arab states, and on the other, turbulent Pakistan and Asia. This army is the firebreak between two tinderbox areas, and in particular the ambitions of Iraq and its Soviet-backed incursions on the Persian Gulf. In its crucial geopolitical position, Iran needs military power and is well aware of Soviet designs on the Gulf and the growing Soviet Navy in the Indian Ocean. So this army means business, and it has 800 British tanks, American artillery, and Russian transport to call upon. The Shah himself makes Iran's position unequivocally clear.
Puisque nous voyons l'impotence des Nations Unies et que les grandes puissances ne veulent pas se battre.
Seeing the impotence of the United Nations, and bearing in mind that the great powers would be foolish to wage war amongst themselves, since that would be the end of the world, we need to be a stable and powerful state, with which the little Don Quixotes dare not meddle.
Les petits Don Quichotte n'oseraient pas se frotter.
As the Shah sees it, Iran must eventually become an Indian Ocean power. He is therefore creating a fleet to assume the role. Destroyers are being delivered, and their crews trained to an effective degree of efficiency. Iran has already flexed its muscles in a brisk firefight with Iraq over the disputed Karg Islands in the Persian Gulf, demonstrating that it can take care of itself.
We either have an independent, modern and progressive Iran, or we have nothing. That's why we think things are going well for us. Others are trying to sort themselves out without regard to the rules and principles of the UN, and the UN cannot punish them. But we could.
Si les Nations Unies ne peuvent pas les punir, mais nous pourrons les punir.
Imperial Iranian Air Force is the largest on the Persian Gulf, a striking power that is delivered by American Phantoms and F-5 Freedoms, with 3 more squadrons of Phantoms on order. Iranian squadrons keep a round-the-clock patrol of their national airspace, and these pilots, partly American-trained, are regarded as superior to anything in the Middle East outside Israel. And with the growing sophistication of those around them, they have a need to be the best. Paying for its armaments, which it buys with a fine disregard for their origin, insisting only on the best, is costly. But Iran will not stop spending until it's built its armed forces to a peak of preparedness. This rapid rearmament, coupled with Iran's spectacular industrial progress, stretches even this oil-rich nation's finances thin. But Iran is a nation in a hurry, for the oil won't last forever. The Shah and his nation are ready to defend what they have achieved. Any serious conflict will be a setback to its economic and social advance. But the determination is there for all to see, friend and potential enemy alike. For, as the Shah himself is fond of saying, Iran intends to become not a power in its own right, but a powerful force for stability and prosperity in the whole area of its influence. Realistically, the Iranians calculate that their oil will reach a peak of exploitation soon, and if its own industrialization continues apace, it'll need much of it for its own machines. But in the meantime, it supplies 5% of the oil needs of the world, and as such, it's of critical importance.
Our oil policy is a very independent and aggressive one. We want to do everything we can to bring its benefits to the people of our country, to establish industries in the interior of Iran, using the byproducts of oil, and to ally ourselves with those who will help us exploit our oil production, all the way from the pump down. This policy is different from that of other oil countries like Iraq. The situation here is different. We don't have Iraq's problems.
Indeed, Iran has problems of its own, maintaining stability in an unstable corner of the world, creating a modern, efficient state out of the remnants of past glory. The time available to achieve these objectives is limited, for they have to be paid for out of Iran's national resources, and they won't last forever. The race is on to make maximum use of them. But Iran appears to be winning.